So, I have a confession for this crowd, and it's actually kind of maybe a little embarrassing because it's unusual. Up until college, I was a pretty straight-edge kid. I hadn't really used any drugs at all. I didn't even smoke pot until I got to college. And the reason why is that, I was always kind of a geek, and, I like to believe that my educators didn't lie to me, but they did. And, I'm sure you guys know about DARE and what it teaches you. There's a lot of real dangers that exist with drugs, but to make up lies just is crazy. And when I got to college, I saw people I respected, people that were around me that were smart and capable people using drugs. And it made me question everything I was taught. And in fact, it started kind of an existential crisis for me. But maybe that was a good thing, because then I found mushrooms, my first psychedelic, and it changed my life. I learned more about myself and my interactions with the world around me in one afternoon than I think I had previously my entire life. And since then, I've become quite the psychonaut. I've been using psychedelics as a practice and part of enriching my life. And I've tried to be open whenever possible about my psychedelic use to my friends, family, employers in many cases, because the drug war is only going to be won when we put a face on ourselves, much like the gay rights movement succeeded through coming out. It's an important phase, I think, of social justice movements where, we're not visible necessarily. Now, there's nothing wrong with being a member of either the mainstream culture or the counterculture. Most of my closest friends are the biggest freaks in the world, and I'm totally proud of them. But there's also nothing wrong with building a mainstream culture that enriches one's life through spiritual, psychedelic, or psychotherapeutic practice. And ultimately, I'd like to think that we're building a community around the practice of enriching our lives through the psychedelic experience, altering our consciousness to help us perceive and understand the world around us. If psychedelics are going to be a part of our culture, they need to break free of stigma and secrecy. We need ritual and context around them, just as indigenous cultures had. And it's up to us to invent this context. And I had a former employer tell me, in fact, we Googled you and we first saw these results and we were like, whoa, what's going on? And then they listened to one of my YouTube talks and they were like, yeah, the arguments you made sounded rational and I couldn't disagree with any of them. So, I think that it goes a long way to just kind of talk intelligently about these things. I was at Rainbow Grocery in San Francisco, which is this hippy-dippy organic grocery store, and I was picking up 5-HTP, and I'm in the nutritional supplement aisle, and I'm looking for it, and there's this old lady with gray hair hunched over looking for something too. And she's like, oh, what are you looking for? And I told her 5-HTP, and she starts pulling out the different brands and explaining what's different about them. And she's like, what are you taking it for? And I was like, well, after an experience with MDMA or certain psychedelics, I like to take 5-HTP because my brain is using a lot of its serotonin. And she said, wow, aren't you smart for your age? Because she was impressed that young people care about their health or whatever. And we started talking about psychedelics. So it's amazing how much, that cross-generational effect happens. And we had a really great chat. So I implore you, come out to your friends, come out to your family, come out to your loved ones, be open and honest about how psychedelics have touched you and changed your life. And consider talking to your legislators. Anyone can make an appointment with their legislators, and it's surprisingly easy to be a citizen lobbyist. When Nixon began the war on drugs, it wasn't an attempt to curb addiction. It was an attack on the free-spirited counterculture that favored psychedelics. The origins of the drug war have never been about reducing the harms that drugs cause to individuals. If it was, we'd eliminate prohibition, as we have well documented its failure. Rather, the war on drugs was started as a way to control and segregate various groups of society. It's naive to think that law enforcement ever provided privacy to us. All this NSA wiretapping stuff, it's caused a lot of people to wake up and realize, holy shit, the government is centralizing all this information, and information is super powerful. When we're talking about consciousness-altering drugs, we're talking about drugs that affect the mind. And for the government to ban these compounds, ultimately, I believe it's a form of mind control. It's our cognitive liberty to use psychedelics as the arbitrators of our own minds. It's easy to make the mistake of trying to measure social justice movements in the brevity of our own lives. Movements don't work that way, unfortunately. And despite the long road that social justice movements must take, drug policy reform has never had more wind at its back. The psychedelic movement has never had more wind at its back. Leary famously talked in the 60s about turning on, tuning in, and dropping out. And I see nothing wrong with turning on or tuning in. But it's the dropping out that had me worried, or has me worried. I think psychedelics have a profound effect on us. And how can we journey without context or ritual or supportive community around their use? I would argue that we shouldn't be trying to drop out of our culture, but instead we should try to model our cultural practices around what we think is right. Psychedelics weren't always counterculture. In fact, the irony is, when LSD was first synthesized, it was used by bougie white therapists with their upper-class white clients who could afford therapy, of course. And it was hardly countercultural. I don't think that movements end. I think that oppression is this thing that is going to always be chasing you or sort of coming at you, and it's up to us to hack away at it. I think that, again, social justice movements they span hundreds of years. So, you don't really get to win, you just get to fight. We aren't that far away from downloading digital drugs either. As brain-computer interfaces become more and more advanced, to the point where our thoughts can interface with software, we're already making some really cool strides on that. We have rat brains that can fly flight simulators. Imagine having a backup co-pilot that was just like a petri dish with a weird rat brain in it. It could be built. I think that the connectedness of the internet is a beautiful and wonderful thing. It's bringing together ideas and people in a way that we've never seen before. I think that as brain-computer interfaces, which I touched on, advance to a certain point, we're going to be able to alter our consciousness through them, maybe even understand the nature of our consciousness. But I think it's, personally, I'm a skeptic, and I think it's a little too early to predict certain things occurring. I'd love to be able to download my consciousness into a computer and have it live forever, but I don't think we know enough about consciousness to know if that's even possible. Perhaps consciousness is just an inherent property of the universe, and we are doing nothing more than channeling it.